I was born on Chicago's South Side, at 7715 South King Drive, my grandparents' house. For years, every time I'd come back to visit my grandmother, Emma Young, she'd be there waiting for me with a warm smile and a piece of cake, yellow cake with chocolate frosting. At home in Chicago's Chatham neighborhood, it brings back so many warm memories. I mean, I could practically taste that cake now as I talk about it. But I wasn't the first member of my family to come into the world there. 3 days before I was born, my cousin Ivan was born in that same house. Actually, a bunch of us. Ivan and me, his brother Larry, our cousin Harold, we all lived together with our moms and our grandparents in that house. Now, us kids, we had a blast. The parents, I guess you have to ask them. But there was always a special bond between Ivan and me. And my mom and I, we moved around for a little bit, and then when I was 5 years old, we made the big move. Yeah, we left Chicago's South Side, and we moved to the Uptown neighborhood. Now, Google Maps tells me that we moved 16.6 miles straight north. But for me, we might as well move to another world. I left Ivan and the rest behind. So much changed for me after this because the South Side is very different than the North Side. Like, no matter where you are, different environments, they bring different chances, different opportunities because, I'll put it simply, you can't be what you can't see. And because I was exposed to these different environments, I think I had a broader perspective. Well, I went on, I became a lawyer. I worked in the White House. I'm an executive at the Obama Foundation. My cousin Ivan's path, it turned out a bit different, but his story doesn't go the way you might expect, and it's that difference, that twist at the end that I'm here to talk to you about. It's that change in Ivan's life that gives me hope for the future. I think it creates a path to bring true change to Chicago and create a better place for our boys and young men of color. Because we don't just have an opportunity to give our young people the hope and tools to find their purpose in life and succeed. We have a responsibility to do exactly that because we can't succeed without them. I truly believe we can do it. So I'm going to start by going to my path to standing here in front of you today. Now, I basically have one foot in the South Side and one in the North, and I think it gives me a perspective on the different parts of our city and our country. Because there are vast disparities between neighborhoods in this city and even some pockets within them, bad and good, safe and dangerous. Studies show that your path can be determined by your zip code. And Chicago, my favorite city in the world, it's a microcosm for this great contrast. The South Side, it plays a defining role in this city and this nation's history. I mean, the first successful open-heart surgery was performed on the South Side. This rich area has given us everything from the Pullman car to gospel music to mild sauce. Mild sauce. I mean, if you know, you know. All that said, it's clear that the South and West Sides have been disinvested in for far too long, especially in comparison to Chicago's other neighborhoods, and that difference became clear to me as I explored my new neighborhood of Uptown. Now look, Uptown isn't Beverly Hills. At the time, it was, and now it's basically a working class, primarily immigrant neighborhood. But because where it's sat, it's connected to infrastructure and resources that meant it was easy for me to ride my bike to Lake Michigan, Chicago's unquestioned jewel. My brand new public school had air conditioning in it, and the one I went to after that had accelerated programs. And there was another thing that happened that made an impact on me. My parents and other adults, teachers, coaches, other family members, they took the time to tell me, really show me that my life was important. And I had a responsibility to succeed because of the sacrifices that were made for me. And those mentors, they had the resources to make those ideals feel real. So, I learned a lot, and I grew. I got in a little bit of trouble. You know that fancy elementary school I told you about? Yeah, I kind of got kicked out of there. But I had more than my share of second chances. Maybe I still felt torn, pulled between these two communities, excited about my future, but also thinking about the path not taken and what I left behind. When I would spend time with my family on the South Side, I noticed they started talking about me like I had escaped some kind of trap. And I started to feel like an outsider, even amongst the people I knew loved me the most. And at a certain point, I realized that there was a very easy way to make that uncomfortable feeling disappear. I could just leave, pack it up and go and not look back. And that is exactly what I did. I got the hell out of Chicago. I moved to Washington, D.C. to start anew and to pursue a dream to begin a career in politics. And eventually, I found myself working for Barack Obama in the White House. And clearly, I felt good about that. Yeah. I mean, I was a new man, and I carved out a place for myself in this new city. I was where I belonged. Now, look, I always had love for Chicago, but to be honest, I started to define it as some place that I was from and not a part of my present or my future. I ended up dedicating my career to changing the lives of people and lived in places like the South Side, but I had lost touch with the place and the people who made me care about that to begin with. Without even knowing it, I had put up a barrier between us. And in my mind, it was all about issues and policies and problems. And for a while, that worked for me, until I got a letter that changed everything. It was from my Aunt Emma, named after my grandmother. She wanted my help. She wanted me to help my cousin Ivan. He was in prison, serving time on drug charge. And there it was, my past. They hadn't left me. Ivan wasn't some abstract problem to be solved on the war on drugs or investing in black communities. He was my cousin. And it was clear to me that while I was climbing the ladder in D.C., I wasn't there for him. Now, in a way, I couldn't help him. I mean, not in the way they wanted. Yes, I was working at the White House, but I couldn't just get him a pardon or a shortened sentence. It didn't work that way. I felt helpless. But I also realized something else. I couldn't run from this anymore. I had to accept where I was from, own everything about that place, and see if I could put some of who I was and what I had learned to work. I mean, I didn't make the decision when I was 5 years old to leave the South Side, but I could decide to turn around and not just look forward, but also look back. So I got to work, and I started to look deeper at the issues facing places like the South Side of Chicago, and you will not be surprised at what I found. All around this country, all around the world, there are obstacles in front of young people that make it difficult for them to get by. Now, forget about achieving some version of the American dream. Let me give you some numbers that illustrate the challenges facing boys and young men of color in this country. Black, American Indian, and Hispanic children are up to 9 times more likely than white children to live in areas of concentrated poverty. Black children make up about 16% of the public school population, but they are 42% more likely to be suspended more than once and 36% more likely to be expelled. High school graduation rates for Black and Hispanic students are 16 and 12 percentage points lower than white students, respectively. Some districts report graduation rates of 50% or less for their boys of color. In short, I learned that this is about a system. And so we need systemic change to shift the odds. And we need that at a community level. And we know what works. I'm going to boil it down to 3 things we can do to connect our young people, particularly our young men of color, to success. We can connect them to purpose, mentorship, and networks, because we all have to stop pretending that we're on a level playing field. Thank you. Researchers at the London School of Economics did an 11-year study of long-term poverty at Bangladesh, one of the most impoverished places on earth. They studied something that's known as poverty traps in over 1,300 villages. And this is what they concluded. I'll quote, "Our key finding is that people stay poor because they lack opportunity. It isn't their intrinsic characteristics that keep people trapped in poverty, but their circumstances," close quote. And that is exactly what I found when I moved from the south side to the north side. There is brilliance and talent and drive all over this city. We have to work to give all our children a chance. Our efforts fail, I think, because too often we treat our young boys and men of color as problems, not as people. But they aren't any different from anyone else. They have talent, they have dreams, they make mistakes. I know I did. But what's more? These young people, they learn, they grow, they evolve. It's like everyone. My work comes to life in a movement called the My Brother's Keeper Alliance. It's a movement that is working to create safe, healthy, and nurturing communities for our boys and young men of color. Here's what's working. In Yonkers, New York, the MBK, that's what we call it, the MBK branch, worked with a school district to create a more holistic way of teaching their young people by connecting them to purpose and mentorship. In 2015, Roosevelt High School was deemed a failing school by the state of New York. Graduation rates had fallen below 60% for several years in a row, and Roosevelt was threatened by a state takeover or conversion into a charter school. Today, ninth graders get individualized attention. Teachers come together as a group to plan, do weekly training, and do yoga. That's right, yoga, together as a group. These young people are connected to a purpose. They are pushed to complete required courses by 10th grade so that they can take classes for college credit. And the teachers, the staff, they serve as mentors, guiding these young people towards graduation. And the graduation rate in 2021, in the middle of a pandemic, it was just under 95%. That's what happens when we connect our young people to mentors who push them to be the best versions of themselves. So, we know we can focus on education and move the needle. But to make progress across sectors, we have to build a network that can operate at scale, and that's what's happening in Los Angeles County, where MBK is working to create a systems-wide approach to impact struggling young people, pushing them and diverting them away from prison and probation and towards vocational and youth development. In Los Angeles County, the black population is about 9%. But the black youth arrests, black youth make up about 30-some% of the arrests. So in this network, people are getting out of their silos. They're working together, government, philanthropy, businesses, community groups, and importantly, they're making space for the voices and the leadership of the young people themselves. Because they're in a network, they're able to build on what works and share what works and learn together and connect these young people to their passion and opportunity. And the result? Since 2018, youth arrests and incarceration rates have dropped by more than 60%. I have one more example for you that's a little closer to home, and it's not a number, it's a person, Anthony Montoya. Now, I met Anthony in Chicago's Little Village neighborhood. Anthony, he had a tough upbringing. He was in a gang by the time he was 14, and was arrested for carrying a gun when he was 16 years old. But his probation officer convinced him to enter a program called Urban Life Skills at New Life Centers in Little Village. That's an MBK affiliate. And when I met Anthony, he was a community leader in that program and was leading programming for 7th and 8th graders. Anthony is attending now the University of Illinois at Chicago and was recently accepted in a 30-student cohort called Future Leaders of Chicago. See, when you connect our young people to purpose, give them role models, stand back and watch what they can do. These challenges are happening everywhere. This story about Anthony, it brings me back to my cousin Ivan and how his story might be different from what you might expect. As I mentioned, Ivan did some time in jail. He served his sentence, paid his debt to society. And I know this is the story you might well think I tell, right? I'm going to talk about my life and Ivan's. I'm going to get all wistful and say, there, but for the grace of God go I. And you wouldn't necessarily be wrong. But here's the difference. Ivan is not a statistic. He didn't just disappear afterwards. He's not a cautionary tale or someone whose name doesn't get mentioned at family gatherings. He did not let that incident, that situation, define him. You know, when he got out, he built on some relationships, got connected into a network, and somebody gave him a chance. He learned the roofing business and built a great reputation. And here's what Ivan does now. Ivan owns his own roofing company. Give it up. He's employing people, including some folks who need a second chance. You know, he's helping himself and others, and along the way, we rebuilt our relationship. Had some real conversations, got a little closer. I mean, he is my big cousin, after all, a whole 3 days older than me. Ivan's story tells me that we all have a part to play in creating the city that we want to live in. I think the biggest change that we can make is how we see one another. And that isn't always easy to do. I know, because I struggle with it myself. You know, these challenges, they're happening everywhere. Chicago's South Side, Indian country in rural America, the suburbs of Paris, everybody's talking about what to do. There's violence, joblessness, hopelessness. I wonder if maybe all of us, everyone in this room, be willing to take another look. Even if you think, like I did, that you are doing everything you can to solve these challenges and divides between race and class. Maybe if we took another look at ourselves, a deep look inside our own stories to see if there is something that is keeping us from seeing our fellow Chicagoans as people, just like you and me. I've learned that it's never too late to take that second look. I don't know exactly what would happen if we did, but I do know that the lives of our young people, but especially our boys and young men of color, would change for the better. Maybe they'd have more investment in their communities. Maybe they'd find there's more mentors in their lives with the resources to take them on that trip to see something new or just help them with their homework. Maybe they get connected to that experience that lights a spark in them, helps them find their purpose, and tells them that their city thinks they're important and wants them to succeed. Maybe they find that there's a network, a movement of change that's coming together, getting out of their silos, focusing on what works and making measurable change, shifting the odds. Now, I don't know what would happen if you did that, but I'll tell you one thing. I bet you'd find a little healing and a little more peace, because that's what Ivan gave me. Thank you.